Welcome, quiet soul. You've arrived at a softer hour where the world slows and forgotten ways breathe again. Tonight, we travel to misty courtyards and cool earthen cellars where flavors once grew not by fire but by time. In the hush of ancient kitchens, patient hands stirred pastes and brines, trusting the quiet work of the seasons. This is midnight sleepless, gently and without hurry. If this stillness feels right to you, a soft tap on subscribe keeps the warmth flowing. And if your eyes are still open, let us know, where are you listening from, and what time is it in your corner of the night? Now, settle back, let your breath grow slow, and let the story begin. You wake to the stillness of a Hosian morning, breath blooming in soft clouds against the chill. Frost clings to the rooftops outside, and the first quiet sounds of life stir again. But before the fire is lit, before rice begins to steam, your eyes are drawn to the courtyard where a row of large clay jars stands silently like sentinels. These are ongeirthy vessels that have rested here for generations. Their wide bellies and snug lids hold more than condiments. They hold time itself, shaped by soil, air, and patience. You step onto the courtyard stones, cold beneath your feet. One jar's lid sits askew. Curious, you approach, lift it gently. A rich, savory scent escapes, salty, earthen, alive. You inhale deeply, then close it again and sit beside it, watching mist drift lazily across the hills. This jar, like its siblings, began as clay from a hillside you'll never visit, shaped by hands you'll never meet. That thought pulls your mind back to where all ongi begin, deep in the earth, and deeper still in the hands of potters far off in a village. Nestled among quiet valleys, the potter's day begins before the sky brightens. Clay is gathered from mineral-rich hillsides, aged and filtered. Stones and debris are removed by hand slowly, patiently. The earth must rest before it's ready to become a vessel. So it's left under thatched roofs, damp and waiting, sometimes, for weeks. When its weight, texture, and softness feel just right, the shaping begins. This shaping is not just craft, it's ritual. The potter, seated close to the ground, uses a spinning stone wheel turned by a barefoot apprentice. Slowly, a base forms. Coils of clay are added in rings, each layer pressed and smoothed, like tree rings marking time. The walls rise, round and never flat, designed to let air flow gently inside. It's not for beauty alone. The jar's porous walls allow oxygen in and moisture out, encouraging the wild fermentation that makes Korean food what it is. By noon, perhaps one jar is finished. Two, if the day is kind, each one unique, but all following the same ancient principles: broad-mouthed, thick-walled, resilient. They dry under the sun, shielded from dust. Sometimes weeks pass before they're fired. The kilns are great earthen chambers dug into hillsides, long, sloping tunnels fed with wood. Each log is chosen carefully for how cleanly it burns. Once the kiln is packed, fire roars for daisiest days. Smoke curls non-stop from the chimney. The potter sleeps little, watching the fire with practiced eyes. No dials, no gauges, just instinct passed from father to son. When the fire dies and the kiln cools, the arched door opens. Some jars emerge, cracked, discarded, or buried. Others are perfect, their skin kissed by flame in streaks of ash, rust, and soot. No two are alike, but all serve the same purpose. There are no signatures on these jars, no names. Their beauty is in their usefulness. In villages, they disappear into daily life, silent, essential, reliable, back in your courtyard. Your hand rests on the curve of a jar. The surface is coarse in some places, smooth in others. Who made this one? Was it an aging potter with soot on his cheeks and a boy learning beside him, or a nervous apprentice hoping his first batch would survive the fire? You'll never know. Only the smell inside offers a clue. Fermented soybean paste, thick with life. It's strange how these simple clay jars can change the flavor of what's stored inside. Their breathable walls allow gases to escape while keeping spoilage out. Fermentation in glass or plastic is different to sterile, to sealed, to modern. In ongi, fermentation listens to the world. In summer, it bubbles fast. In winter, it slows to stillness. Each jar reacts to weather, to time, no to batches. Of kimchi or doenjang tastes exactly alike even if made with the same ingredients, by the same cook, in the same house. It's the jar. It's always the jar. So families pass them down, not just recipes, but the jars themselves. This one makes good soy, someone says. That one is for salted shrimp. They become part of the family, not for their beauty, but for their reliability. Memory clings to their sides, and yet, how many potters still make them this way? In cities where courtyards become kitchens and jars are replaced by steel, does space remain for such old, unmarked craft? Perhaps that's a question for another time. The sun has risen now. A rooster cries out. Someone inside your home begins to stir. You gently replace the lid on the open jar. The fermentation continues, quiet and unseen, and yet you wonder, how? Did people know long before science, thermometers, or textbooks that this was safe, that this food wouldn't harm but heal? You return indoors, but your thoughts stay with the jars. They do not shine, they do not speak, but without them, every meal would lose its backbone. They don't store food, they transform it. Season after season, without a word, they do their work. Later, with the day in full swing, you return to the courtyard with a worn ladle carved from persimmon wood. You know which jar to choose. It bears a pale scratch from being dropped 10 winters ago. You lift the lid. The scent rises, doenjang, pungent, thick, a little cheesy, brown like old earth, golden where sunlight hits. You stir it gently, watching the small bubbles rise and fade. What begins here will finish in the kitchen, a soup with tofu and wild greens, maybe, or a marinade for grilled eggplant. No exact recipes, no measuring spoons, just memory, taste, and quiet trust between clay and cook. Each ongi has its purpose, one for gochujang, red and fiery, another for soy sauced, drawn from the upper layers of a paste with nothing wasted. Cracked lids are replaced with stones. Curious cats are chased away. When a lid is lifted, a sniff tells everything. Now it's midautumn. The air hints at frost. This is kimchi season. Whole cabbages are salted, drained, rubbed with chili, garlic, ginger, and fermented fish, packed tightly into jars, pressed down, covered with cloth, weighted with stone, and left. That is the soul of fermentation here, doing nothing, waiting, trusting, no sensors, no timers, only time. And behind it all, the women who watched over these jars, though history rarely names them. While kings dined on feasts, it was these women mothers, wives, grandmothers, who gave each dish its soul. Winter comes, and the jars must be guarded. Fences of wood and straw shield them. Mats are wrapped like cloaks around their cold shoulders. Too heavy to move, they are protected where they stand. Even in snow, someone will brush their lids each morning, checking for cracks, sniffing for change. In those small daily acts, an entire food system survives. When spring returns, the rhythm of fermentation awakens once more. Slender young radishes, barely thicker than a thumb, are transformed into light, watery kimchi, their crisp bite, a sharp contrast to the deep funk of their winter ancestors. Chilies are laid out under the sun, drying for future batches, and here and there, someone dares to experiment. Perhaps roasted soybeans are added to an old recipe, or water is drawn from a new well. Every choice, every shift in salt, in timing, in sunlight, changes the final taste. Yet, amid all this change, the rhythm holds steady. Clean, store, check, wait, stir, taste. Fermentation isn't something you control. It's something you guide. One evening, while helping your grandmother sweep the courtyard, she lifts the lid of an old jar long untouched. Inside, the paste is nearly black, thick, dense, and smooth like honey. She smiles and says softly, "This one is from the year your uncle left for war. We used river salt, and the frost came early." She dips a finger in, tastes it, and nods, still sweet, still alive. It's in that moment you understand. These jars don't just flavor food, they store time. Each season, each memory, each hand that stirs becomes part of what's inside. That's why no two jars ever taste the same. The weather was different. The salt came from another shore. The beans grew in a drought. The hands had aged. Every detail is preserved in silence, in clay. And so, families pass down more than recipes. They pass down jarsage with its own character, its own quiet history. Some households have a lucky jar that always yields perfect kimchi. Others keep a cursed one, pulled from the shadows only when the rest are full. You've heard of northern families who kept fermentation journals, not scientific logs, just simple notes, more sour than last year. Try thicker rice next winter. Observations passed from generation to generation. Fermentation, not as science, but as memory work. Visitors from the city sometimes laugh. So big, they say. Why not use a fridge? They don't understand. Ongi are not just containers. They are companions. They breathe, they sweat, they wait. And maybe, in their own way, they remember. On winter nights, as wind howls through alleys and smoke curls from chimneys, you lie awake, wondering, do the jars react to the cold? Does the soy sauce thicken slightly in its sleep? Has the shrimp paste quieted its bubbling? Are the microbes inside curling up, waiting for spring? You'll never know. But that mystery feels like part of the magic. Still, a question lingers. If fermentation is a dialogue between human and microbe, what happens when one side forgets how to listen? The world outside is shifting. Dirt roads are paved. Courtyards shrink. Roosters are replaced by ringtones. The old jars, once ever present, are rare now. Some gather dust behind sheds. Others are sold in antique shops. A few are filled with soil and flowers. Many are gone altogether. One afternoon, you walk through a modern market. Fluorescent lights buzz overhead. Shelves gleam with polished metal. Everything is wrapped, sealed, labeled. There are jars of doenjang here too, and soy sauce bottles, all lined up like soldiers. Predictable, uniform, safe. One label reads, naturally brewed, temperature-controlled fermentation. It is food, yes, but not memory. In this sanitized, digitized world, the old ways seem too slow, too uncertain, too reliant on weather and instinct. They demand space, patience, attention, qualities the modern world often discards. And yet, some still remember. You travel to a small village tucked in the hills of South Gyeongsang province. There, a woman named Okaya still makes ongi the traditional way. Her yard is calm, the ground scattered with drying clay and low wooden tables. She doesn't advertise. She doesn't sell online. When you arrive, she offers barley tea and points to a blackened chimney. Her hands are rough, her fingernails dark with earth. She shows you the process, not like a guide, but like a guardian of something sacred. You don't make ongi, she says. You invite it. The jar decides what it wants to be. You ask how many jars she finishes in a month. She chuckles. Depends on the clay and my knees. Around her, young women shape lids with flour-dusted arms. A boy pumps the turning wheel while a man throws rings of clay with the rhythm of song. This is not a workshop. It's a conversation between generations. When asked about modern fermenting tools, she nods gently. They're convenient, but too quiet. Fermentation needs to struggle a little. That's what gives it soul. She lifts the lid from one jar. The aroma is layered, wild, alive. This one is 5 years old, she says. We open it only when the grandmother dies. That was the promise. And it strikes you, then these jars are not tools, they're memory vessels. Some have been fermenting longer than children have lived. They hold not only bacteria, but love, grief, ritual, silence. When you leave, she places a small jar in your hands. Use it, she says, even if it's just for water. Don't let it sit empty. Back in your city apartment, you place it gently on your balcony. Small, no, taller than your forearm, but solid, rooted. You don't use it right away. You wait, but eventually you begin. Some chopped radish, a spoonful of garlic, a pinch of last year's chili powder. No measuring, just memory. The first batches are flawed, too sour, too salty. A lid tips in the rain. Mold appears, but you adjust. You learn to watch the sky, to smell the wind. You greet your jar each morning like an old friend, and slowly something begins to change, not just in your food, but in you. You move more slowly, notice more, hear the seasons shift. Your fingers grow more sensitive to weather. The jar teaches you not through words, but through time. Sometimes a guest sees it and smiles. My grandmother had one like that, they say. Their voice softens, their eyes drift elsewhere. You nod in that quiet. Something passes between you. Later, over dinner, you taste something familiar. Not just flavor, but feeling. A note from childhood. A memory in your mouth. It isn't the ingredients alone. It's the clay, the air, the trust. Fermentation, you've learned, is not a process. It's a relationship. One that rewards attention. One that returns care with nourishment. In a world of speed and noise, perhaps the most radical act is this: to wait, to trust, to let things grow unseen. The ongi does not ask for praise. It does not explain itself. It just waits, breathing, deepening, remembering. And maybe what we need most now is not something new, but something old, something quiet, something that doesn't rush. So when the night deepens and the city glows like a circuit board beneath you, you place your hand on the jar, still warm from the sun, and ask, in a world racing forward, can something this slow still teach us how to live? When the soybeans soften just enough to be mashed by hand, but still hold their shape, they're lifted from the pot and spread across woven mats. Steam rises in soft waves. Children are sometimes called to fan them, shooing away flies, cooling the beans gently. There's laughter, some impatience, but always a quiet joy in being part of something. These small tasks become anchors of memory, linking warmth and family to the silent, sacred rhythm of soy sauce making. Once cooled, the beans are crushed with wooden pestles and kneaded by hand into firm, dense blocks. It's not elegant work, messy and fragrant, with a thick, earthy smell that lingers for days. The bricks must be just right. Too loose and they'll rot. Too tight and they won't ferment. Each block is wrapped in braided straw and hung from rafters or porch beams to dry. This is the moment fermentation truly begins. The courtyard becomes a stage for invisible life. On warm days, the smell of fermenting mayu drifts through the village, a sharp, sweet, deeply umami scent. Garlic braids and dried chili branches hang nearby to deter flies. Sometimes incense is lit, not for flavor, for blessing, for faith that the magu will not spoil. Weeks pass, sometimes months. The bricks don't just dry. A white fuzz appears, friendly mold, then darker patches, blue-green veins, a silent, visual language only the experienced can read. What looks spoiled to one is perfect to another. In homes across Joseon, this process unfolds like a seasonal migration of flavor. Every family adds its own touch. A wild leaf tucked inside, a dusting of rice flour, a few days left in kitchen smoke. Small choices, but they matter. Years later, someone tasting your soy sauce might say, "Ah, you're from Namwon," just from the depth of salt or temps. In a world without labels, soy sauce became a regional dialect. Today, you notice how many courtyards hang their miju together. This isn't a secret, it's communal. A few women gather, comparing bricks, sharing last year's ganjang in small jars, offering quiet praise. The work is personal, but the wisdom is shared. Children run beneath the hanging blocks, careful not to bump them. They've heard stories. A broken mayu brings bad luck, but they also know the reward: first soy sauce over warm rice, or mixed with sesame oil for mountain herbs. Sometimes a brick goes wrong, too moldy, too wet, cracked through. It's not thrown away, it's buried, returned to the earth. If you ask why, a grandmother might shrug. This one needed to go home. Today, you help brush mold from a brick's surface with a straw broom. The texture is hard now, almost woody. The smell is strange, cheesy, bitter, alive. This maju will soon meet water, but not yet. It must finish its quiet drying under winters. Pale sun. Inside, your aunt readies the ongi jars, the same ones used for generations. She cleans them with salt water, scrubs them with bamboo brushes, taps for cracks. Some jars are better for gunjang, others for donjang. There's no mark, no note, she just knows. You ask why she never writes anything down. No recipes, no measurements. She smiles. Because the soy sauce knows, she says, I just listen. That night, curled on your sleeping mat near the kitchen, the scent of drying mayu drifts into your dreams. You remember holding a brick, earlier rough-edged, oddly shaped. You wonder how something so simple becomes the soul of an entire cuisine. And deeper still, you wonder how anyone ever learned to trust it, to believe that rot could become nourishment, that time and invisible life could turn decay into flavor. Morning brings the next step. The bricks, now dry and solid, are ready. Their outer mold has matured. Their insides have hardened. A thin frost glistens on the rooftops. In the courtyard, the jars wait with open mouths. Your mother begins placing the bricks into the largest ongi, one by one, gently. The scent that rises is warm, smoky, fermented, nutty. Each mayu is spaced apart. Air must flow. Water must move. Fermentation needs room to breathe. She pours in the saltwater, sun-dried sea salt, dissolved in well water drawn the night. Before, it must be just right. Too salty, and fermentation stalls. Too weak, and bacteria thrive. There is no measuring. Spoon, just her wrist, her gaze, the knowledge in her fingers. The meju slowly sink beneath the brine. At first, they float spongy light. Then they settle, releasing soft bubbles. A wooden lid is placed on top, not airtight, just enough to keep out dust and birds. A stone is set gently with a soft thunk, and the jar is left to the sky. Moment when soy sauce begins is quiet, almost invisible. But everything starts here. As seasons pass, the mahu and brine converse. Proteins unravel, amino acids form. The liquid darkens, thickens. The scent grows, richer, deep, layered, comforting. In spring, you check the jar. The water has dropped. A fine white film covers the surface. Your mother skims it off with a bamboo spoon. She works silently. You ask how she knows when it's ready. By the smell, she says. Then, and the sound. Sound. She removes the lid, stirs once with a long-handled ladle. The liquid shifts and speaks a low, thick glug. She listens, head tilted. Still too thin, she says. 2 more months. This is patience, not waiting, but tending, watching, trusting, listening, with senses inherited, not taught. All summer, the jars are watched. Too much sun, and the sauce goes bitter. Too little, and fermentation stalls. Some households use straw screens. Others place shallow water troughs nearby to cool the jars. Then the sauce begins to separate. The bricks dissolve. The liquid rises clear. Dark gongjang. The bottom thickens dongjang. The paste. 2 staples from one jar. Nothing wasted. Everything transformed. When it's time, your aunt draws off the ganjang with a curved bamboo ladle. The family gathers. The first taste is a quiet celebration. Sometimes a neighbor is invited. Approval comes in a nod or a soft, "This year's is warm." That word, warm, means layered, seasoned, just right. The soy sauce is poured into smaller ceramic bottles, some for use, some for aging, some wrapped in cloth and sent to distant relatives, gifts of care, skill, and time. But the real labor was never just the sauce. It was in the relationships between people, seasons, and invisible life. Your aunt recalls last year's pale batch. Too much rain, she says. It never dried right. No blame, no shame. Everyone understands. Fermentation is not control. It is cooperation. In some homes, there are many jars, lined and known by memory. In others, only one the year's hope. In monasteries, the sauce is austere. In palaces, it's infused with dried fruit. Everywhere, the essence is the same. This is not a product. It is a story. It does not scale. It does not rush. It resists machines. It lives in hands, in memory, in time, and every drop tells you so. As the days go by, you begin to notice something subtle, yet profound. The soy sauce continues to change, even after it's bottled. Open a jar too soon and the taste is sharp. Open that same bottle a month later and it's mellow, round, full. You start keeping notes, not recipes, just quiet observations. Jar near the wall, aged faster. Spring water was too soft this year. Try in late March next time. These aren't entries for a cookbook. They're part of the unspoken rhythm of your courtyard. One night, beneath the quiet sky, you glance at the soy sauce on your plate. Just a touch in the stew, but it completes everything. You taste the salt, the depth, the quiet umami that lingers. And you think of the long, invisible labor behind that single drop, soaking, boiling, shaping bricks, drying, hanging, waiting, fermenting, separating, ladling, bottling, all for a flavor so soft it nearly slips past unnoticed, and yet it holds everything, whether mistakes, patience, time, and touch. You dip your finger into a new batch and taste it slowly. It's good, very good. But a quiet question settles in your heart. As our lives grow faster and quieter, will we still know how to hear when the soy sauce is ready? The first snow arrives, dusting the rooftops in white. The jars outside sit still and cold, their contents long drawn and sealed. The season of making is over for now, but soy sauce in the home, that's only beginning. In the kitchen, a bottle of ganjang sits near the stove, catching the warm flicker of firelight. It touches everything. A spoonful in breakfast broth, a drizzle over greens, a whisper in stews. At first, you don't even notice it. You taste the dish, not the soy, but take it away, and something feels hollow, as if the meal spoke in whispers instead of words. This quiet strength is why soy sauce is essential in Korean homes. It doesn't demand attention. It anchors. It deepens. It brings harmony, like the bass note of a song you didn't know was there until it was gone. Each family's soy sauce is unique. Yours has a soft opening, a tang at the finish. Your grandmother's was darker, saltier. Your aunt's is smooth, almost sweet. A neighbor's is brisk and sharp, like morning frost. These aren't just tastes differences, they're reflections of time, of household rhythm, of hands and memory. In this way, soy sauce becomes a kind of signature, unseen but familiar. During ancestral rites, it's placed among the offerings, not as a condiment, but as a trace of home. Brides once carried jars of their mother's ganjang to their new lives, tucked among linens and rice. It's not just seasoning, it's remembrance in liquid form. There are stories, too. An old man recalls sneaking tastes of raw soy sauce as a child, finger dipped into the fermenting jar. Another remembers the winter a batch failed, And his mother wept not for the lost sauce, but for the broken cycle, the comfort that would not come. Others tell quieter tales, soy sauce used to soothe an aching stomach, drops offered at funerals, in meals for the dead. Monks flavoring rice balls with aged soy sauce, eaten in complete silence. These moments aren't written down. They live in hands, glances, murmured memories passed at the kitchen sink. But times are changing. In a city supermarket, the shelves gleam with factory-made soy sauces, bold flavors, sleek labels, promises of instant aging, low sodium, smoke-infused. You wonder how many of these ever saw sunlight, ever breathed through clay, ever changed with the wind. These bottles aren't wrong, but they are different, missing something ancient, slowness, uncertainty, life, the kind of sauce made not with machinery, but with winter air and waiting hearts. Back home, you open a bottle aged in your cupboard for 2 years. It pours thick, chestnut dark. You taste it slowly. It's familiar, not just in flavor, but in memory. You remember the mahou bricks hanging in the cold, the sound of lids being lifted, the quiet waiting. No one asked if it was ready. Everyone simply listened. You bring a small bottle to a friend's apartment. She grew up in Solno jars, no cellars. You drizzle a few drops on tofu. She tastes it, surprised. "What is that?" she asks. You smile. "It's home." As you eat, she asks why it tastes so deep. You tell her not with instructions, but with stories. Later, she whispers, "My grandmother had jars like that. I never knew what they were for." She asks if you'll teach her. So, in spring, you buy soybeans together, soak them, boil them. In a borrowed cauldron, shape the mahou with your hands. Hang them from her apartment balcony. Neighbors glance. Some complain. One knocks, asking, "Are you making something rotten?" You laugh and say, "Not yet, but soon." Time passes. The bricks dry. The jars fill. The soy sauce begins to grow. And you don't rush, because now you understand this isn't just about soy sauce. It's about learning how to make something slow and true. Something that leaves no logo, no barcode-only flavor, and time, and love. And as that quiet jar breathes on a small city balcony, you wonder, in 100 years, will anyone still remember the scent of fermenting mahou drying under the eaves in winter? Each day, the jar is stirred not with a spoon, but with a clean, bare hand. You reach in slowly, fingertips brushing the bottom, lifting the cloudy mixture with care. The liquid clings as you draw your hand back, dripping with half-formed wine. Your grandmother once taught you to smell your palm afterward. If it smells like boiled rice, it's not ready. If it smells sweet and sharp, then it's close. Makjoli ferments quickly. Within a week, maybe 10 days, it comes into itself. But readiness is never precise. It isn't measured by time, but by taste. Some drink it when it's light and sweet. Others wait for the sour edge to deepen, for the alcohol to gain weight. In the village, flavor isn't a rule, it's a reflection. It bends to season, to experience, to memory. When it's deemed ready, the wine is filtered through muslin, soft and slow. The leftover rice sediment, called juk, is saved fed to livestock or folded into pancakes. The wine, milky and alive, is poured into bottles or clay jars and stored away from sun. It is never aged. Makjoli is meant to be drunk fresh, while it still fizzes gently before the taste begins to fade. today. Your grandmother ladles from the jar and holds it up to the light. It glows, cloudy white, flecked with rice. She offers you a sip, cool on the tongues, lightly sweet, slightly sour, faintly sparkling. What follows is not just warmth from alcohol, but from the memory it carries. Makgeolli isn't served in glasses, but in shallow bowls. You take one outside, sit on the steps, and sip slowly as morning unfolds. Across the yard, your grandfather tends the garden. He pauses, sees the bowl in your hands, and smiles. Spring batch, he says, tastes like rain in the village. Makgeolli moves with the seasons. In spring, it's brewed to bless the planting. In summer, to ease the heat. In autumn, it comes with harvest. In winter, it warms hands wrapped in wool. Each batch carries the moment it was born. Each sip is fleeting, but Makgeolli is more than drink. It is comfort, offering, and unspoken gratitude. During communal work rice planting, roof thatching, repairs families would not pay in coin. They'd serve food, and Makgeolli labor was traded for bowls. At weddings, it was handed to elders before a single speech. At funerals, it was poured onto soil, one last toast to the departed. And in quiet moments, between only two people, it could say what words could not. You remember your father's stories of mountain monks guarding their fermentation secrets like scriptures, of travelers sharing a bowl by riverbanks with strangers they never saw again, of farmers under starlight, drinking after long days, hands sore, hearts soft. Makgeolli has no hierarchy. It's not aged for prestige, not reserved for the rich. It is humble, perishable, alive. And that, your grandmother always said, is its magic. Back in the cellar, she wipes the jar's rim, humming a tune she's known forever. Beside the jar, a small wooden stick sits etched with barely visible lines, dates, temperatures, little flavor notes. A ledger of memories, not instructions. You ask if she ever thought to write down the full recipe. She shakes her head. No two batches taste the same, she says. So what would I write? You climb the stairs, bowl in hand. The scent of rice and thyme clings to your clothes. You think about the process, the rice, the nurek, the waiting, and ask yourself, what happens to a drink that depends on memory when the memory keepers are gone? Later that week, you return to the cellar. The first bottle is already empty. There was no celebration, no birthday, no festival, just a neighbor passing through with a bundle of radish greens, asking about your grandfather's knees. Your grandmother offered her a seat, fetched a bowl, and poured a ladle of Makgeolli without saying a word. You watched them drink side by side on the steps. Their talk drifted from old injuries to the weather to rice harvests long past. The wine didn't loosen tongues, it softened them. That's Makgeolli's gift. It doesn't intoxicate. It returns people to breath, to earth, to story. Later, you asked how she knew the right moment to share. She only smiled. The jar told me. In these villages, Makgeolli wasn't kept for guests. It made guests. It turned strangers into friends, labor into kin. The drink was only ever a doorway. What mattered was what came after. A tale, a confession, a song that hadn't been sung in years. Each season shaped its flavor. Spring brought floral, gentle brews made with meltwater and the first grains. It was the taste of beginnings. Summer, brewed, bold, and fizzy, strong enough to cut through sweat, These batches were poured after long, hot days in the fields. Autumn wine was rich and cool, shared at Chusac, passed around moonlit games while children snuck sips and laughter hung in the air. Winter was hushed. Jars sat under straw, slowed by cold. The wine was dense, comforting. Old men drank quietly. In kitchens, snow melting at the door, Macjoli was never drunk alone. Not by tradition, but by design. It soured too fast. It lived in the now, and now is best shared. Some households earned reputations not for strong wine, but for kind wine. One family's batch might bring laughter, another's silence. It had less to do with ingredients than with hands. The clay of the jar, the grain of the spoon, the voice of the one pouring. You remember your uncle's return from the city, tired, older, quiet. Your grandmother didn't question him. She placed a bowl by his side and kept peeling garlic. He drank slowly, then said, "Tastes like when I was 16. That was all." But it was enough. Even in cities, families tried to recapture that magic. Some brewed in refrigerators. Others bought factory bottles, sterile, filtered, sweet. But it never tasted right, too clean, too finished. Macjoli was never meant to be finished. It was meant to be becoming. You once asked your grandfather how long he's been drinking it. He smiled, "Longer than I've had teeth." Then, more softly, "Since the year my brother left for war, he gave me his last bowl." The memory holds not because of the wine, but because of what it marked. Macjoli is part drink, part calendar. Some farmers marked time by the jar. This batch soured fast. May must have been too hot. Remember when the wine exploded from the lid, the year of the typhoon. Even loss was traced through fermentation. The wine carried stories, not in ink, but in aftertaste. It whispered them forward. One evening you sit with your grandmother again. The air is cool. Another jar nears readiness. She lifts the lid. A spoonful, then offers it to you. You swirl it in your mouth, creamy, tangy, a little quieter than the last. "Good for storytelling," she says. You nod. She tells you about the first time she brewed alone. She was 15. Her mother was ill. The workers needed wine for planting. She followed the steps as best she could. It wasn't perfect, too thin, too bland, but no one said a word. They drank every drop, she says, and the field was finished by sundown. She touches the jar. It was never just about the flavor. Then she asks, when people stop drinking from the same jar, do they stop sharing the same stories too? Years pass. They always do. The cellar grows quieter. The jars rest longer. Some are covered, waiting for a season that may never return. The house, still full of memory, begins to echo, but one jar remains. You find it while cleaning, half buried behind old firewood. The rim is chipped, the lid a little warped, but it still smells faintly of fermentation. You know it immediately, her favorite. The one she said listened better than the rest. You ask if you can try a batch. She looks up from the hearth and smiles. Of course, she says, but remember, it won't taste like mine. And that, somehow, makes it even more yours. Even as you move through the motions, you sense how fragile the memory is. Every step is exact, yet unrecorded. Each gesture holds countless silent choices when to stir. How firmly to press the grains. What sound the mixture should make when it's ready. The cellar no longer smells the same. The air is warmer now. The earth beneath the floor feels dry. You try your best. A week later, when you lift the lid, the scent surprises you. It's not hers, sharper, edged with a faint sourness. The foam is thinner, the liquid more cloudy. Still, you stir it, strain it through cloth, and bottle the wine just as she once showed you. That evening, you offer her a bowl. She sips in silence, pauses, then nods. Yours is younger, she says, but it has a good beginning. You both smile. Seasons pass. You make more batches, some better than others. You begin to write things down, dates, temperatures, ratios, but the notes feel hollow beside the feel of rice slipping through your fingers, the whisper of bubbles on a cold morning. The best jars still rely on instinct, not ink. One winter, you decide to share. You carry a few bottles to the city, wrapped in cloth inside your backpack. Your friends lift them with mild curiosity. Rice wine, they ask. Isn't that what they sell at the store? You smile, not quite. You pour at the table. Someone sniffs it. Someone else winces. But one person sips, lingers, and says softly, "It tastes like a story I forgot." And you realize then, taste was never the point. Macjoli is an invitation, a way of saying, let's pause, let's sit, let's speak from somewhere older than today. You begin hosting quiet gatherings each season, not parties, something gentler. A few friends, simple food, a couple of bottles. You don't explain everything. You just pour, listen, and let the wine speak. Some friends ask to learn. You teach them slowly, one batch at a time. One burns the rice. One forgets to stir. Another uses bottled water, and the brew falls flat. But they return. They try again and again. And when their jars finally begin to sing, you all gather to taste. Each batch is different. Some soft, others sparkling, some to sour, some to sweet. But every one is shared. You realize you're no longer trying to recreate your grandmother's wine. You're continuing its voice. Back in the village, she watches you load another jar into your cart. She doesn't brew anymore, but she asks questions. How long it fermented, how you managed the mold, whether the weather shifted. She doesn't judge. She remembers. One night, sitting by the old hearth, she tells you something she's never said before. There was a time, she begins, when I thought it would all disappear. The jars, the taste, the rhythm. People left. No one listened. Everything sped up. You stay quiet, she continues. But it didn't vanish. It just went quiet, waiting for someone to listen again. The jar between you is nearly empty. You pour the last bowl and set it before her. It smells faintly of spring pear, soil, warmth. She drinks, exhales. You did well, she says. You watch the fire flicker in silence, full and soft. And you think of the jars, now living in city kitchens, on balconies, in basements and backyards. Not many, but enough. Makgeoll. I was never just a drink. It was a practice, a patience, a pause, a way of being that resists speed, scale, and convenience. It asks for your full presence, and in return, it offers a bowl of something soft, sour, and sacred. And as the wind sharpens outside and the fire settles low, you wonder, when every recipe is digitized and every wine commercialized, will anyone still remember to listen for bubbles in a quiet jar beneath the floor? The wind grows sharper in late November. Persimmon trees stand bare, their branches scratching the roof tiles. The The fields are stripped to stubble. But in the courtyards of every home, something begins urgent, essential, older than memory. You wake to the sound of chopping outside. Your aunts and cousins are wrapped in coats and scarves around low wooden tables. Red chili flakes dust their sleeves. Halved salted cabbages sit waiting in baskets. A stone basin gleams with a thick mixture of garlic, ginger, fermented shrimp, and scallions. It is kimyang, the winter kimchi ritual. You step into the cold air, sharp with brine and spice. Your breath clouds, but the women don't flinch. Their hands are red from salt water, stained orange from chili. Still, they keep working. The rhythm is inherited. In the Joseon dynasty, kimyang was more than food prep. It was survival, ceremony. Summer's vegetables are gone. Barley hasn't sprouted. Rice is stored. What you make now, how well you salt and seasoned, will shape the next 4 months. It begins before the first frost. Salt is hauled in sun-dried and coarse. Cabbages are harvested early while still sweet and crisp. They're brined for hours. Under stones, then rinsed and drained. Limp now, they are ready. You help carry the heavy bowls from the well. Your arms sting. The women test the leaves. If they snap, they're not ready. If they fold like fabric, they are dot in another corner. The seasoning paste is mixed. Gochugaru is stirred into rice, porridge, garlic, ginger, and fermented seafood. Some families add fruit for sweetness. Recipes vary north to south, even house to house. The taste is as personal as handwriting. When it's ready, each cabbage is gently opened, layer by layer, the paste tucked deep into each fold. It's not rushed. It's tender, work-like bundling a child for snow. There is laughter. Someone gets chili in her eye. An aunt yells for vinegar. A cousin hums a half-remembered song. You sit beside your grandmother. She fills a jar, pressing the leaves down. No gaps, she says. Kimchi hates emptiness. The jars are brought to the back courtyard. A shallow pit lined with straw, covered with planks and stones. Some homes bury them. Some use cellars. The goal is simple, cold, but not frozen. The earth becomes your refrigerator. Nature becomes your partner. Your grandmother lowers a jar. We won't open this one till the new year, she says. It will taste of snow by then. She sprinkles salt on the lid, ties it with cloth. One jar, then another. By sunset, 20 jars sit hidden under stone, holding the memory of this day. That night, fresh kimchi is served, sharp, cold, alive. Your grandfather eats quietly. An uncle drinks makgeolli by the fire. Everyone is tired. But there is comfort in the weariness. Winter has been faced, not just the cold, but the hunger. The jars are a promise. We will eat. We will remember. You ask your grandmother how long she's made kimchi this way. She shrugs. Since I could carry salt. And before that, she smiles. Since your great-great-grandmother had a courtyard. Kimchi wasn't invented. It was remembered, carried forward, reshaped by need and time. There was a time, she says, when people competed over recipes. When scholars wrote essays on cabbage. When royal kitchens kept meticulous logs. But here, the only rule was, make enough, and make it last. A dog barks. A crow lands on the wall. Someone is still salting radish nearby. Even when done apart, kimyang is always shared. You look at the rows of jars and realize each one holds more than cabbage. It holds time. It holds today's breath, today's salt-stung hands. You taste a bit of leftover paste. It's stronger than you expected, not just in heat, but in memory. And again, you wonder, in a world of pre-made kits and store shelves, will anyone still know how to flavor a winter with their own hands? The cold deepens, slowly at first, then all at once. One morning, the well is rimmed with ice. The clay pots are frosted. Your breath stings your chest. Winter has arrived. But below the stones, deep in the ground, something else is happening. Something warm, something waiting, something remembered. The kimchi you packed only weeks ago is already changing. Beneath the salted folds of cabbage, quiet fermentation stirs on. The cold slows it, but never stops it. Garlic grows sharper, ginger mellows, chili settles into warmth, shrimp paste deepens into richness. The vegetables, in the dark, begin to speak to one another. Then, on a windless day, when snow lies thick across the yard, your grandmother lifts the lid from the buried pit. With bare hands, steady in the cold, she selects one jar. It takes both of you to lift it, chilled and weighty with promise. Inside, the kimchi has ripened to an amber hue. The brine is cloudy. The scent, when released, is sharp enough to sting your eyes, yet alive, not unpleasant. She scoops some into a bowl and carries it inside. The fire glows low in the hearth. The house is cold, but the bowl is placed gently beside a pot of steaming rice and a ladle of clear broth. She calls the family to gather. You taste it slowly. This is no longer the crisp, bright kimchi of autumn. Its deeper now's flavor, richer, almost meaty. The crunch remains, but it has softened. The spice no longer shouts, it murmurs. Your grandfather smiles. This, he says, is the real one. Your cousins tear into rice. Your uncle adds more soup. Someone refills a water bowl. It is a humble meal, but complete. Because here, kimchi is not a side dish. It is the heart. The dish that makes everything else speak. In old Hosean homes, winter kimchi was served with barley rice and anchovy broth. Meat was scarce, especially in the countryside. But no one complained. Aged kimchi made every table rich. Some households prepared separate jars for different moments. One for early frost, one for deep winter, one reserved for spring when the body craved greens, but the land had none yet to offer. The oldest, called mukunji, was soft, tangy, almost to sour, but perfect for stews and braises. Its strength tempered with pork or tofu. Even past its peak, it was never wasted, just transformed. You remember your grandmother once said, kimchi doesn't expire, it evolves. In the palace, court ladies recorded each jar's journeys, smells, textures, flavors. When royal kimchi turned sour, it became pancakes, dumplings, soups. Nothing was thrown away, but in homes like yours, there were no records, just instinct. You learned by sound. The hiss of a jar told you it was still alive. A crack meant it needed eating soon. A sharp tang signaled soup time. Even in the depths of winter, meals were guided by the jar's quiet instructions, and they spoke of more than food. They told stories of care, of salted hands, of long hours crouched in the cold, leaf by leaf. Each bite was memory, a soft echo of warmer days, now sleeping under snow. Sometimes neighbors would bring jars to one another, not out of abundance, but solidarity. A widow without firewood, a family grieving. One jar per home, but flavor enough for a village. Kimchi became a language. In some families, the first jar of the season was offered to the ancestors. A bowl placed before the altar alongside rice and broth. "Thank you for the harvest," whispered the mother. "Thank you for the winter." That night, you sit beside the jar, fingers resting on its rim. Tiny cracks show from the cold, but they've held. The cabbage inside has begun to sink into its brine. You press it gently down, the scent clings to your hands, and you let it stay. Across the courtyard, you wonder how many generations have stood just like this, tasting, stirring, preserving. You ask your grandmother how she knew this was the jar to open. She replies simply, "The hunger told me." Today, in modern kitchens, kimchi is measured, packed, sealed. It has labels, acidity charts, expiration dates. It is safe, predictable, quiet. It waits for you, but it does not speak. But here, in the earth, kimchi still murmurs. And on this winter night, with shutters rattling and the moon high above bare trees, it says, "You made it. You are still here." You finish your bowl slowly. The house falls into stillness only. The fire crackles, and sleeping children sigh in their dreams. You think of all that's been preserved in that jar, not just food, but effort, time, memory, survival. You think of other valleys, other homes, jars tucked into hillsides, on balconies, in cool rooms, and you wonder, as winters grow warmer and our tables more crowded, will there still be room for a jar that waits beneath the snow? Spring arrives, quietly, not with a shout, but a sigh. The snow thins, the wind softens, light lingers longer in the evenings, and inside the courtyard jars, change continues. The winter kimchi is nearly gone. Its brine has thickened. The cabbage leaves have turned translucent, their bites softened into silk. Its strength now is not in sharpness, but in presence. The flavor is round, like a voice that no longer hurries to speak. You open the last winter jar one late afternoon. The air feels warmer than it has in months. You and your grandmother sit on the steps with a bowl between you, a few spoons of rice, a ladle of broth, and this final taste of the season already fading. She eats slowly, not from age but reverence. She knows what this bite means. It is not just a meal. It is the end of a jar you filled together, the closing of a memory you didn't know you were making. You stare into your bowl, astonished at how much this simple dish cabbage, salt, time can carry. Your grandmother notices your silence and says, "We never called it precious, but it was." She tells you of her first kimchi winter as a young bride, how the salt cracked her hands, how her first jars turned bitter, how her mother-in-law scolded her, and how, that same winter, a neighbor's jar shattered in the freeze. And they came to her door with empty bowls. They said mine was better than they expected. She laughs softly. She never forgot that winter, and even now, she makes kimchi not out of duty, but devotion for the practice, for the people, for the future taste. In the old days, recipes weren't written. They lived in gestures, in hands, the press of cabbage, the swirl of paste, the tilt of radish, the jujube added, not for health, but for comfort. Even today, when tutorials abound, flavor still depends on the hand. Some kimchi tastes clean, others wild, fermented with memory and storm. Yours your family's, is something in between. Rooted in a quiet valley, shaped by the places you've since seen. You ask if she ever wanted to change it. She shakes her head. Why change what already knows how to wait? She points to one jar still buried. That one's for your uncle. He'll come before planting. You smile. It's not just about him. It's about the moment. The act of opening, of sharing, of remembering without needing words. Some families pass down heirlooms, rings, books, tools. Yours passes flavor, not locked in glass, but living in the body, in the hands that rub leaves, in the breath between taste and swallow, in the knowing of when to open not by date but by feel. You think of all the jars over the years, cracked, shared, soured, celebrated, opened at funerals, saved for weddings, marked with symbols only one person understood, each a chapter, each a reply to the question, will you endure? That night, as the fire dims, your grandmother gives you something small, a clay lid chipped, scorched, smooth from touch. It was your great-grandmother's, she says. From the first jar I helped her fill, you run your thumb along its edge. It fits perfectly. It doesn't seal anymore. She smiles. But it remembers how to. You place it gently beside the hearth. Not long after, you return to the city. Seasons turn again. Markets brim with tidy, labeled jars. Predictable, measured, clean. You taste them. Some are good, but none whisper like hers. None carry the weight of stone and snow. None know how to speak when opened. So one spring, you begin again. You find coarse salt. You choose cabbage not perfect, but real. You boil rice porridge. You grind garlic. You stir chili paste with your bare hands. And in your apartment, the scent of the valley returns. In a world obsessed with the new, the useful, the immediate too, find yourself drawn to what whispers instead of shouts. Vinegar teaches you how to notice again, to notice what remains, what ferments quietly in corners, but now feels essential. So you begin a jar of your own. At first, you don't mention it. It sits hidden behind the kitchen door, small, dark, and patient. You feed it leftover wine, the peels of fruit, a spoon of honey now and then. There are no measurements, no tests, just quiet observation. Days pass, then weeks. A film begins to form. The scent deepens. You stir it softly, only when it seems to ask. One day you taste it. It isn't perfect, but it's honest. You start using it slowly. A few drops over noodles, a spoon in soup, a rinse for spinach. A friend visits with a sore throat. You stir vinegar into warm water with honey, just as your grandmother once did. They sip, wince, then smile. What is this? They ask. Something that used to be wine, you say, but you know it's more. It's a jar of trust, trust in time, trust in transformation, trust in the value of grass and ripening fruit. In the courtyard corner, your vinegar jar rests beneath a slanted slate, half in shadow. You lift the lid. The surface gleams a deeper color now. The film is gone, folded into the liquid, dissolved by time. It's clear, sharp, steady. It has waded through summer heat, patient and unseen. You dip a ladle, sip, it bites, then bows. Its sharpness doesn't warn. It teaches. Your grandmother sits beside you. She smells your cup. This one, she says, smells like when we couldn't afford sugar. You glance at her. She tells a story. One monsoon, the markets were flooded. No salt, no sugar. So her mother, your great-grandmother, fed the vinegar jar with rice water left from cooking. Over weeks, it thickened, soured, became a quiet kind of salvation. That jar helped us survive, she says. You look at it again, just liquid, and yet it feels heavier than stone. In old Hosan villages, vinegar was not glamour, it was grit. Deepened the broth. When pickles spoiled, vinegar restored them. When heat knocked someone out, vinegar water brought them back. It didn't make feasts, it made do. You recall another tale, told last winter by firelight. Up, but warmed with barley tea, the vinegar helped. Slowly, her appetite returned. Not a cure but a kindness. And so vinegar became known for that. Kind, sourness. In a culture chasing sweetness, sweet rice, sweet fruit, sweet wine, it was vinegar that brought balance. Without it, dishes were cloying. With it, flavors found their truth. Your grandmother returns to the kitchen. You follow. She prepares something simple. Boiled eggplant, sliced and cooled. A bit of soy sauce. A whisper of garlic. Then 3 drops of aged vinegar. No stirring. Just letting it find its place. She hands it to you. Taste, you do. The eggplant is soft. The sauce salty. The garlic bright. But it's the vinegar that lingers quietly, insistently. It brings everything alive. You look at her, she shrugs. Vinegar knows how to bring things back. That night, you sit beside your jar. Leaves stir like turning pages. You think about what this vinegar has touched. A bitter broth, a child's fever, a bowl of cabbage, a grief too large for words, and always quietly, never taking, only balancing. You reflect on your own habits, the way you chase newness, loudness, ease. This jar asks for none of that. It asks to be noticed, fed gently, used humbly, respected, not for flash, but for patience. In the cities, vinegar comes in plastic bottles, efficient, predictable, soul-less. They will clean your counters, pickle your onions. But will they carry memory? This one does. This vinegar carries a monsoon, a morning, more than liquid, a philosophy. Not all change is loss. Not all sourness is failure. Some of life's richest gifts are slow, unseen, made from leftovers. Tomorrow, you will begin another jar. Apple peels, pear cores. You won't know what it will become, but you will feed it. Wait, trust, because now you understand. Vinegar doesn't demand perfection. It only asks, will you stay long enough to see what I become? Long before science named them, before microscopes found them, people knew, not in terms, but in instinct. Tiny workers, invisible cooks, life inside jars. In Joseon, Korea, no one spoke of microbes, but they understood. Something was alive in there. Something that worked while the world slept. You sit beside an old fermentation jar, closed but not sealed. Its lid tilts, held by cloth and twine. Nothing moves, nothing stirs, and yet you know. Down, garlic melts into salt water. Rice wine becomes vinegar. Fish paste turns into umami. No hands, no fire, just time. This is nature's kitchen. Long before Pasteur, before Petri dishes, before germ theory, people learned by watching, listening, remembering. Your grandmother once said, if the lid puffs up, the sauce is too active. If it cracks, the ferment is too dry. If it whistles, the microbes are happy. She wasn't a scientist, but she was right. You remember how she tended to jars not with force, but with care. She'd lean close, smell, touch, whisper, and when she added anything, salt, water, paste, she did so gently, respectfully. They don't like surprises. She'd say ferments were treated like pets, or children, fed. People learned you don't control fermentation. You collaborate with it. There were rules. Don't stir kimchi during a storm. Don't move jars under a full moon. Open lids only at certain hours. Were these rules scientific? Maybe not. But they came from generations of quiet wisdom. People saw patterns, salted hands, softened pastes. They adapted, whispered knowledge, never written, and the microbes kept working. On rice husks, in well water, on wooden spoons, even on your skin. No sterilizers, no gloves, no labs, just the knowledge that life was working in those jars and that it worked best when left alone. Your grandfather once said, the smarter the cook, the quieter the ferment. You didn't understand then, now you do. Fermentation means surrendering, just enough. In rare old texts, you find phrases like wild air, ripe jars, and restless paste. Poetry meant to describe life before science could, and maybe poetry is still the better language for what lives in a jar of vinegar. You stumble upon a line in a faded household ledger from the 1700s. The paste hums, the jar is warm, the courtyard smells of sleep. You close your eyes, like try to picture it, a world where kitchens were not sterile battlegrounds, but sanctuaries shared with invisible allies, where people cooked with trust in forces they couldn't see. Fermentation wasn't exotic, it was ordinary, essential. Today we refrigerate, sterilize, pasteurize. We wage quiet war against the wild. We favor the measured, the known, the sealed. Fermentation has become chic, sold in boutique jars with branded labels. Garlic honey, kombucha, gourmet hot sauces. They're good, but curated, controlled, tamed. In villages of the past, it was different. The ferment lived in the rhythm of life. It wasn't praised, it was assumed, a necessity. It preserved food through lean months, added flavor to plain rice, made nutrition last. It taught patience, resilience. You begin to see microbes, not as tools, but as companions. Ancient friends never seen, always tasted, in the tang of last year's kimchi, in the fizz of hastily poured makgeolli, in the mellow depth of doenjang cured in sunlight. And you wonder, what else in life works like this? What else asks for preparation, trust, surrender, and rewards us through quiet transformation? A bubble rises from a jar. It pops with a soft plip, still alive, still cooking, still reshaping the world, one breath at a time. And you ask, in an age that demands evidence, how do we make space for things that work without needing to be explained? You wake early, before the fire is lit, before rice is rinsed. Your grandmother is already in the courtyard, her hand on clay, ear near cloth, listening, not speaking, not rushing. In this household, the jars guide the day. When doenjang bubbles, it's spring. When kimchi hisses, it's winter. When makgeolli fizzes, to fast a storm is near. The jars speak, and the home listens. As a child, you were told not to shout near the fermentation pit, not to stomp, not to open lids often. You'll startle them, your grandfather warned. Only later did you understand. Gas pressure, oxygen balance, bacterial stress. But back then, It felt like magic, and maybe it still is, because this isn't just food, it's a system of time, a sensory calendar. The household moves by its weeping dust from the courtyard, adjusting meals to ferment stages, treating flavor as weather. The microbes have their own rhythm. They rise with morning warmth. They rest during cold nights. They feed slowly. They dislike haste. They've taught the people to slow down. The elders don't count in hours. They say, wait until the scent shifts. Check after the next rain. You'll know when it softens. No clocks, just trust. One day, your cousin rushes through the courtyard. A lid is knocked loose. Your grandmother stops, lifts it, sniffs. Too much air, she says. Start over, no scolding, just attention. The home hums with quiet discipline, not rules presence. In summer, jars are moved to shade. In winter, snow is brushed off lids. No one tells anyone. It just happens, because to forget the ferment is to invite imbalance, not just in taste, but in spirit. You sit beside your grandmother as she crushes chilies. The air burns your throat. She hums, calm. What happens if we stop fermenting? You ask. She pauses. We'd still eat, she says, but we wouldn't remember. You ask what she means. These jars, she says, are how we keep time, how we pass down touch, how we say, this is how we waited. You reflect. Most modern kitchens don't smell like this anymore. They hum with machines, timers, buzzers. Precision has replaced patience, but here, the microbes still guide. They whisper when to salt, when to stir, when to leave it alone. And the people listen. Your aunt brings new chili paste. It's sharp, too fresh. Your grandmother tastes it and says, let it sit with the old ferment. It needs to learn from it. You smile, because that's how the house works too. The young learn from the old. The fresh learns from the aged. Nothing is wasted. It's simply not ready yet. At night, you circle the jars. One exhales as you adjust its lid. Some feel warm, some cool. You touch each one like checking pulses, still alive, still transforming, still teaching. And you wonder, as our homes grow quieter, cleaner, do they also forget how to listen? The weeks pass, the jars breathe on. They speak without words, through scent, texture, quiet, Fizzing. You learn to measure time, not by calendar, but by change. The clarity of brine, the softness of cabbage, the way lids tighten or loosen with air. Here, waiting is not delay, it's devotion. Fermentation isn't just food, it's philosophy. You realize this one morning. Your grandmother sits beside a soy jar, doing nothing, just watching. How long has this one been fermenting? You ask. She smiles. Since your cousin learned to walk. Time here is not a countdown. It's a becoming. The jars teach that nothing meaningful hurries, that effort must be followed by rest, that invisible work is still work. You begin to see this pattern elsewhere. Dough needs to rise. Seeds need silence. Love needs time. The jars show you that change needs stillness. Growth asks for care, not control. You jot your learnings in a notebook. Fermentation is surrender, not command. Good flavor needs time and presence. Not all bubbling is bad. Some is life. Each line was taught not by a teacher, but by a jar. Your grandmother says, in old monasteries, fermentation duty was given to young monks. Not just for food, but for humility. If you rush, it fails. If you interfere too much, it spoils. If you neglect, it dies, she recalls. The head monk once said, "The one who learns to ferment learns how to live." You believe it now. Fermentation reveals that life must decay a little to become rich, that bitterness left undisturbed becomes complexity, that sweetness with time becomes strength. You begin to speak to your jars not with words, but with presence. You stir gently, cover carefully, you sense more, measure less. Your food changes. You stop rushing rice. You stop fearing dark vinegar, thickened soy, softened cabbage. You trust the process, not fully in your control, but never out of reach. You begin to see fermentation as a quiet kind of hope. It teaches that even rot can be redeemed, that the sharp can mellow, that time, when respected, transforms hardship into nourishment. You think of all things that ferment slowly: grief, understanding, forgiveness, trust. We try to rush these, sell them, skip their silence, but the jars never rush, never apologize, never fear. They simply continue, and so do you. They work in silence beneath the surface, without spectacle, until one day they're ready, and you know it, not because of a timer, but because something shifts in you. That evening you stir a spoonful of doenjang into your stew. It tastes richer, deeper than before. You did nothing different, except wait. You rest your hand on the jar and whisper, "Thank you." The lid responds with a soft hiss, still alive, still listening, still teaching. As moonlight slips into the courtyard and the fire dims to embers, you find yourself wondering, in a world so afraid of waiting, what else might flourish if we just gave it time. Before the jar was opened, before the spoon dipped, in you smelled it. That sharp, oceanic scent rolled over you like a coastal storm, salty, fermented, alive, not spoiled, but seasoned by time. A little wild, a little humbling. You always knew when a fresh batch arrived. Your grandmother would unwrap it from layers of cloth and straw. Slowly, reverently, inside a clay pot sealed with wax paper and twine. The salt had crystallized on its outer rim like frost. When the lid came off, the entire kitchen filled with that unmistakable scent. The younger ones would wrinkle their noses. The elders would smile. "It's good," your grandfather would say. "Smells like the coast." And that's where this story begins. You remember standing by the river on a muggy summer morning, watching shrimpers return with baskets of translucent shrimp no bigger than grains of rice. They moved slowly through the mudflats, nets in hand, feet sinking with every step. Their arms were browned by the sun, their ankles caked in silt. These weren't the proud, oversized prawns from restaurant menus. These were the humble kind, the ones that spoil fast if not salted by sundown. By the water's edge, women waited, with sacks of coarse sea salt. There was no time to waste. The heat was heavy, and flies swarmed. The work began immediately. In wide ceramic basins, they layered salt and shrimp like sediment, one, then the other, over and over. No measuring tools, just generations of practiced rhythm. You helped once, just a handful. But you remember the way the shrimp twitched, even under salt. How the salt seemed to vanish into their bodies. How the pink liquid began pooling at the bottom like a quiet promise. That night, the courtyard smelled thick with brine. Not pleasant, but not unpleasant either. Just summer, in a house that fermented everything. By morning, the change had begun. The The shrimp had softened. The brine turned darker. Salt had done more than preserve it, had invited transformation. After a week, the paste was transferred to jars. Some were buried in ash pitskool, dry, undisturbed. Others lived near the kitchen, stirred occasionally, marked not with labels, but with string, stone, or a scratch only your grandmother could decode. When you asked why ash, she said, because fire leaves the coolest places behind. You thought about that for days. Ash was once flame, and now it protected. Weeks passed, sometimes months. Enzymes went to work. Salt kept danger away. Time brought flavor forward. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't clean, but it was sacred. So often your grandmother would check a jar not with words, but by scent. A deep inhale, a furrowed brow, a quiet not yet, and back it would go when it was finally ready. It wasn't meant for feasting. It was a whisper, a hint, a soul added to something larger. Just a spoon in the kimchi, a dab on tofu, a drop in soup. Sojiat wasn't the dish. It was the soul of the dish. And you think of that now, sitting by an old jar dug up last week. The ash has settled, the rope is frayed, but the scent, when you lift the lid, is alive, sharp, salty, bitterness, then warmth, strangeness, then memory. This is what patience tastes like, what time and attention do to the sea. You add a spoonful to your soup, the entire dish deepens not in color, not in texture, but in presence. You don't announce it, you just eat. And as the wind moves fallen leaves across the yard, you wonder, in a world obsessed with freshness, who remembers the power of something that had to rot just a little to become this rich. The next morning, the smell still lingers not, sharp now, but mellow. It mingles with rice, bean broth, and the steam of boiled greens. The jar rests closed, but its presence fills the room. Your grandmother opens it again. No flinch, no hesitation. She stirs, tastes, then nods. It's ready again, she said. It before, so giant, changes with the air, the salt, the jar, the day. Some mornings it bites, others it hums. Fermentation is not a moment, it's a relationship. At breakfast, you watch her work, a smear here, a dab there. Each dish tilts toward it like plants toward sun. In homes across Korea, especially in the south, saujiat is not just food, it's heartbeat. You once asked, why not just use fish sauce? She looked at you, puzzled. That's like asking if I can replace my name, she said. Fish sauce is loud. Shrimp paste listens. You didn't understand then, but now. After cabbage and rice, after a bite of radish dipped in sesame, you begin to understand. Saujiat doesn't dominate. It remembers. It connects. Salt to sea, table to memory, food to the firewood of generations. When someone gives birth, a spoon of saujiat is added to porridge. When someone is sick, it heals in broth. When elders visit, it waits quietly in one dish, not to impress, but to honor. It is seasoning, but also ceremony. A reminder of the hands that harvested, that salted, that stirred, of time preserved. Later that week, you follow your grandmother to the back storeroom. It's cool, earthy, quiet. 3 jars wait on the shelf, one for winter. Kimchi, she says, one for your uncle, and one for a wedding. You blink. Whose wedding? She shrugs. Whoever needs it first. And you smile, because these aren't just jars. They're readiness, stored care, time, waiting to be kindness. You lift one. The crusted lid groans. Inside, depth, richness, patience, rendered edible. People wrinkle their noses at the idea of Sojayat now. Too old, too smelly, too strange, you understand? But you also mourn what's lost. Because this is not just an ingredient. It is salt and silence. It is memory aged. It is a sermon in a jar. You remember the story she once told when salt was scarce, and two families shared one jar. One week in your kitchen, the next in theirs. When it ran low, they added more salt and waited. They didn't argue. They just ate quietly, grateful for what remained. That jar, she said, taught them more about patience than any teacher ever could. You look now at the jar on the counter, and you understand. They work quietly. No noise, no announcement, just transformation, slow and unseen. And then, one day, they're ready. You don't know by a clock. You know because something in you shifts. That evening, you stir a spoonful of doenjang into your stew. You taste it. It's deeper than before. You changed, nothing except that you waited. You press your hand gently to the jar. Thank you, you whisper. The lid lets out a soft hiss. Still alive, still listening, still teaching. And as moonlight spills into the courtyard, and the last ember glows in the hearth, you wonder, in a world afraid of stillness, what might grow if we simply gave it time. Before you tasted it, before the jar opened, before the spoon dipped in you, smelled it, a wave of salt and sea, and something old, not spoiled, aged, like the first breath before a storm reaches shore sharp. Humbling, unforgettable. Saugeot, salted shrimp paste. You always knew when a new batch arrived. Your grandmother would unwrap the bundle layers of cloth and straw, untied gently, like opening memory itself. Inside, a small earthen jar, sealed with wax and rope, its rim rimed with dried white salt. When she opened the lid, the kitchen filled with that unmistakable scent. The children would wrinkle their noses. The elders would nod knowingly. It's good, your grandfather would say. Smells like the coast. And that's where this story begins. One summer, you stood by the riverbank, watching the shrimpers' return baskets full of pale, glassy shrimp, no larger than rice grains. They waded through the flats with long-handled nets, each slow step, sinking into the mud, their sleeves rolled, their ankles caked in silt. They had to be salted before the sun went down. The women waited at the edge of the water, coarse salt in hand. There was no time to waste. The heat was heavy, the flies insistent, the shrimp already softening. They poured the shrimp and salt into wide ceramic basins, layer after layer, shrimp, salt, like breath, like ritual, no measurements, just memory. You helped once, just a handful, but you remember how the shrimp squirmed even beneath the salt, how the salt seemed to vanish into them, how pink liquid slowly gathered at the bottom. Like the beginning of something old and sacred, they covered the basin with a bamboo lid and left it in the shade. That night, the courtyard smelled thick with salt and sea. Not pleasant, not unpleasant, just honest. It was the scent of summer in a house that fermented everything by morning. The change had begun. The shrimp no longer looked whole. The brine had deepened. The salt had drawn out more than moisture. It had summoned transformation. After a week, the mixture was moved into jars, some buried in ash pitskull, steady, silent. Others kept near the kitchen, checked by scent, stirred now. and then, each marked not by label, but by memory, a string, a stone, a scratch. Only your grandmother knew which was which. You asked once why she used ash. She smiled and said, "Because fire leaves behind the coolest places." Ash was once flame, and now it protected. The jars sat for weeks, sometimes months. The shrimp broke down further. Enzymes stirred quietly. Salt kept the harmful things out. Time brought the flavors forward. It wasn't a pretty process, but it was deliberate, careful, sacred. Every so often, your grandmother would open a jar, not to taste, but to smell. She'd lean in, inhale slowly. Her brow would furrow, then soften. "Not yet," she'd say, and seal it once more. And when it finally was ready, it wasn't for a feast, just seasoning. A spoon in kimchi, a smear on tofu, a drop into stew, never a mouthful. That wasn't its purpose. Sojayat wasn't the dish, it was the soul behind it. Salty, yes, but also deep. Umami rich, faintly sweet, mysteriously complete. You only noticed it when it wasn't there. For all its work, all its smell, all its waiting, it was used in whispers. Now you sit beside an old jar, dug up just last week. The ash has settled, the rope is frayed, but the smell, when you lift the lid, it's all still there, sharp, briny, then warm, strange, familiar. You dip your spoon, taste, and you understand. This is what patience tastes like, what devotion tastes like, what the sea becomes when someone tends to it with salt and silence. You stir it into your soup. The dish deepens, not in color, not in texture, but in soul. You don't speak, you just eat, and as the wind carries fallen leaves across the yard, you ask, in a world obsessed with freshness, who will still honor the value of something that had to rot just a little to become this rich? The scent lingers into morning, no longer sharp, just gentle, fused with steamed greens, warm rice, and bean broth. The jar sits closed on the counter, but its presence is undeniable. Yesterday, it transformed your stew. Today, it will guide your breakfast. Your grandmother opens it again, no flinching, no hesitation. She stirs, tastes one drop, then nods. It's ready again. She's told you before, shrimp paste is never the same 2 days in a row. Some days it stings, some days it sings. It depends on air, salt, time, and touch. Fermentation isn't an event, it's a relationship. At the table, you watch her work, a pinch here, a dot there, each dish leaning into it like a flower toward the light. In many southern Korean kitchens, sojayat is not an ingredient, it is the pulse of tradition. You once asked why she didn't just use fish sauce. She looked at you, puzzled. "That's like asking if I could change my name," she said. "Fish sauce speaks loud, shrimp paste listens." You didn't understand then, but now, as you press your tongue to the roof of your mouth after rice and cabbage, you begin to get it. Shrimp paste doesn't take over, it connects, it deepens, it remembers, it binds food to sea, salt to sun, memory to table. When a baby is born, it's stirred into porridge for strength. When someone is ill, it heals in broth. When elders visit, it's present in at least one dish, not to impress, but to honor. It's more than seasoning, it's symbol, preservation, history in a spoon. You think of the hands that caught the shrimp, the hands that salted them, the hands that stirred the jars, and how many good things in your life began that way, quietly, invisibly, without ceremony. Later that week, you follow your grandmother to the storage shed behind the house. It smells of clay, earth, and sea. 3 sealed jars rest on the shelf. One for winter kimchi, she says. One for your uncle, and one for the wedding. You pause. Whose wedding? She shrugs. Whoever needs it first. And you smile. Because these aren't just jars, they're readiness. They're time, held in trust. They wait silently until called upon. And when they are, they give everything to you. Lift one gently. The crusted lid yields with a soft pull. The scent rises, then settles. This one is darker, richer, the shrimp long dissolved. What remains is liquid gold. A little will go far, none will be wasted. You've seen how others wrinkle their noses at Saugia too strong, too strange, how they prefer what's clean, soft, packaged, palatable. You understand, but you also grieve, because there is something sacred in this process, in this scent, in this spoonful that traveled through salt and time and memory to arrive at your table. Your grandmother once told you a story of a time when salt was so precious, 2 families shared a single jar of shrimp paste. They passed it back and forth one week in your kitchen, the next in theirs. When it ran low, they added more salt and waited together. No one argued. They just ate quietly, gratefully. That jar, she said, taught us more about patience than any sermon ever could. You glance at the jar now, and you understand. They labor quietly out of sight, without fanfare, till one day they're ready, and you feel it, not because a timer rings, but because something inside you knows. That evening, you swirl a spoonful of doenjang into your stew. It tastes fuller, deeper, more alive. You haven't changed the recipe. You simply waited. You rest your hand on the jar and murmur, "Thank you." The lid releases a soft hiss. Still alive, still listening, still teaching. As moonlight spills into the courtyard and the fire fades to its final embers, a thought rises. In a world terrified of waiting, what else might thrive, if only given time? Before the jar was opened, before the spoon dipped in, you smelled it. That sharp, briny scent rolled over you like a coastal wind, salted, fermented, undeniably alive. Not spoiled, seasoned by time, wild, humbling. Saugeot, salted shrimp paste. You always knew when a new batch had arrived. Your grandmother would unwrap it slowly, with carecloth, straw, wax paper, twine. The clay jar rimmed with salt crystals, like frost tracing old pottery. When the lid lifted, the entire kitchen filled with that pungent, unforgettable perfume. The children wrinkled their noses. The elders smiled. "It's good," your grandfather would say, "smells like the sea." That's where this story truly begins. You remember standing at the riverside one sticky summer morning, shrimpers returning, their baskets brimming with translucent creatures no larger than rice grains. They moved through the mudflats like shadows, nets trailing, ankles sunk in wet silt, skin bronzed by sun, arms steady, patient. These weren't the proud prawns of menus and markets. These were fragile, humble. They had to be salted by sundown or they were lost. Women waited nearby with sacks of coarse sea salt. There was no pause. The work began immediately. In wide ceramic basins, they layered shrimp and salt like earth and time one, then the other. No scales, no spoons, just rhythm, memory, instinct. You helped once, just a handful. But you remember how the shrimp twitched beneath the first layer, how the salt disappeared into their bodies, how a pale pink liquid began to pool quiet, like a secret starting to form. That night, the courtyard smelled thick with brine, not sweet, not foul, just summer, in a house that fermented everything. By morning, the change had already begun. The shrimp softened, the brine darkened. The salt didn't just preserve it. Some vessels were buried in ash pits, cool, dry, undisturbed. Others stayed near, the kitchen stirred, touched, marked with string or scratches only your grandmother could read. You once asked her, why ash? She replied, because fire leaves behind the coolest places. You thought about that for days. Ash was once flame. Now it protected. Weeks passed, sometimes months. Enzymes stirred, salt guarded. Time moved flavor forward. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't sterile. It was sacred. Sometimes your grandmother would check a jar. No words, just scent. A slow inhale, a furrow of the brow. Not yet, she'd say. And back it would go. When it was finally ready, it wasn't a centerpiece. It was a whisper, a thread, a soul inside something bigger, a smear on tofu, a drop in soup, a spoon in the kimchi. Saujiat wasn't the meal. It was its soul. You think of this now, beside an old jar, unearthed last week. The rope is frayed. The ash has settled. But when you lift the lid, the scent is still alive. Sharp, salty, bitterness, then warmth, strangeness, then memory. This is what patience tastes like. This is what time and salt do to the sea. You add a spoon to your soup. The dish doesn't just taste different, feels different. Not in color, not in texture, but in presence. You don't announce it. You just eat. And as dry leaves rustle across the yard, you wonder, in a world obsessed with freshness, who remembers the power of something that had to rot just a little to become this rich? The next morning, the smell lingers. Mellow now, warm. It drifts between rice, bean broth, and boiled greens. The jar sits closed, but its spirit is everywhere. Your grandmother opens it again. No hesitation. She stirs, tastes, nods. It's ready again. She's said it before. Saujiat changes with the air, the salt, the jar, the day. Some mornings it bites. Others it hums. Fermentation is not a moment. It is a relationship. At breakfast, you watch her move. A dab here, a smear there. Each dish tilts gently toward it like sunflowers toward light. In homes, across. It's a heartbeat. You once asked, why not just use fish sauce? She blinked. That's like asking if I can change my name. Fish sauce is loud, she said. Shrimp paste listens. You didn't understand then, but now, after rice and cabbage, after radish dipped in sesame, you begin to. Saujiat doesn't dominate. It remembers. It binds salt to sea, memory to meal, firewood to family. When someone gives birth, a spoon in porridge. When someone is ill, a drop in broth. When elders visit, a hint in one dish, not to impress, but to honor. It is seasoning. And ceremony, a trace of hands that harvested, salted, stirred, of time preserved. Later that week, you follow your grandmother to the storeroom. It's cool, quiet. One for your uncle, and one for a wedding. You blink. Whose wedding? She shrugs. Whoever needs it first. And you smile, because these aren't just jars. They're readiness, care stored in clay. Time waiting to become kindness. You lift one, the crusted lid groans. Inside, depth, salt, patience, alive. People wrinkled their noses at Saugiat now. Too strong, too old, too strange, you understand. But you also mourn, because this isn't just an ingredient. It is salt and silence. It is memory aged. It is a sermon in a jar. You remember the story she once told when salt was scarce and two families shared one jar. A week in your kitchen, the next in theirs. When it ran low, they didn't panic. They added more salt and waited. They didn't argue. They simply ate, grateful for what remained. That jar, she said, taught them more than any teacher ever could. Now, you stand before your own jar and you understand. Thank you for keeping company through quiet kitchens and the gentle work of time. In a world that often rushes, you chose to linger where patience once flavored every meal. This is my DNA, Sleeplies, where stories unfold like steam from an old clay pot, slowly, warmly, quietly. If this calm stays with you, a soft subscribe will bring more slow nights your way. You're welcome to whisper a good night in the comments or simply rest in silence. Now close your eyes and may your sleep be deep, steady, and full of warmth. Good night.